justice for all. I'd like a roll call, please.
Commissioner Webster? Here. Commissioner Holzhausen?
Here.
Commissioner Johnson?
Here.
Commissioner Garber?
Here.
Commissioner Howard should be walking in any minute.
We'll call him excused until he gets here, and then we'll call him here.
Commissioner Emery?
Here.
Chairman Broder?
Here. Thank you. I'll need a motion at this time to approve today's agenda.
So moved.
Support.
Motion with support. Any changes or discussion on the agenda? Hearing none, all in favor of approving today's agenda signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Today's agenda is approved. We have one thing on the agenda, the wage study. Dr. Boggs, would you like to kick us off here?
Yes, so last year you contracted with Municipal Consulting Services, and Mark Notley has conducted a wage study for the county. Now it has several parts and several pieces to it, and it has looked at every single employee across the county, compared it to a batch of constituent counties that are similar in various ways that he will discuss with you. And then also looked at some of the surrounding area around us, because as you know, we're kind of in a donut hole around some other counties. And based on that, he has created a wage scale and some recommended classifications and changes. As you might realize, that it's been a while since we've done this. Inflation has hit. Others have raised salaries in different ways, and we have not over the course of the last several years or kept up with that. And so, as opposed to the first time this was done 5 or 6 years ago, or the most recent time it was done 5 or 6 years ago, there were a lot of red lines and different things like that. That is not the case this time, as you will go through this. And after Mr. Notley gets done presenting, we will have a recommended motion to begin the process of implementing these, and I'll explain the steps of that process.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. I have one request. Would you all mind if I stood up? I'm just sliding out of this chair. So, anyway, good morning to all of you.
Morning.
It's nice to meet this whole board. I haven't before. What I'd like to do is to take you through the study process, give you some sense about what we were trying to achieve and how we went about it and what the outcomes were. So you have a very large report which I sent you, so I don't know, there's been a couple months if you've had a chance to go through that whole report. But I thought it would be easier if we had a little presentation outline. So I think all of you have one of those. It's just a very short, maybe 10-page presentation. So what I'd like to do with your concurrence is just take you through that page by page, give you a sense, as I said, excuse me, of what we were trying to accomplish and what we achieved. So there's page numbers on this presentation outlined in the bottom right, so I'll reference those if you care to follow along with me and take you through it page by page. So a little bit about the objectives, and Brian alluded to that. First objective, first checkpoint, oftentimes when we do this study, the biggest problem is not so much comparison to the labor market, it is comparison to other employees. We get a situation where someone feels they're not being paid fairly in relation to someone else. Before you know it, you have a big morale problem. Last time we did this study, there was a lot of that. I don't think it is much this time, but we wanted to make sure that everyone was in the proper grade and properly evaluated in relation to all the other jobs. Now, secondly, of course, we wanted to look at the labor market. So our objective there was to pull back a lot of information to look at the whole issue of pay parity. How are you compensated in relation to counties that are of similar size, have a similar organization, and in most cases similar taxable valuation and ability to pay. Once we did that, we had these two pieces of information. My objective then was to create a new grade structure for you that included all the positions with the exception of some of the bargaining units that are public safety oriented, as well as the elected officials and the county coordinator. Going forth with objectives, the 4th check mark down, we wanted to give you some sense of total compensation as well, not just salaries, when you look at what people make, there's a bigger bundle of things that cost the county money, all of those benefits that are awarded to employees. So we wanted to give you some feedback also related to employee benefits, where you stand in relation to others, whether you're high or low, and in my case, a couple of recommendations for you on where you might make changes. Second check from the bottom. Once we did all this, we get into the whole issue of money, which is probably the most important issue. And we wanted to make sure that you had the cost data that you needed to look at this whole situation and the pay levels of your employees, and to see if you could actually afford what is being recommended. My own experience, which is humbly limited with being a board member, is that when I didn't have good information, I didn't do a very good job of making decisions. You're kind of in a vacuum when you're in that situation, and our objective here was to give you that information so that however you went with this, you were in a situation that had hard data to look at before you actually came to a conclusion. And lastly, our objective was to create more than a report. We wanted to create a system so that this isn't a one-page document that gets implemented and sits on the shelf. The idea here, all of the data that was collected, as well as different recommendations on how to implement the system going forward, it's all included in the report. So the idea here is that this can really be an administrative document that the county can use going forward each year to update it and use it for administrative purposes. So report versus system, and I think we've achieved that. Let's take a look at page 3. And just very easily, I wanted to give you a sense here of our approach to the project, and I like to think of it, conceptualize it in 4 different phases. The first phase, classification analysis, is really just a fancy way of saying getting to know the jobs, getting to know the organization. If I don't do that when I do these studies, I'm not in a very good position to do the study. And a lot of time was spent on the front end, getting to know the organization, getting to know the duties of every single job. Again, if I don't do that, it's not going to turn out very well. And as I'll explain with various tasks, a lot of time was spent doing that. Phase 2, once we were through phase 1, we could start looking at the market. And 2 things there, we had to decide who we were going to compare you to. Obviously, counties have the same types of jobs that you have. A lot of them are specific to counties, so we wanted to look at counties. As Brian mentioned, we also wanted to take a look at some of the surrounding counties which are larger than you, which you can't really compete with in regard to pay. But we wanted to get a sense of what they're paying so that as recruitment problems come up, you have some sense of why those recruitment problems exist. Phase 3, as I'll talk about it more than once we had good market data, once we had a good understanding of the jobs, we could go forward and put together a grade and salary structure. And that's really the foundation, the centerpiece of this whole project, this whole report. And I'll go over it in a bit, but it's really just 1 page. Everything else is kind of superfluous. Everything else supports that 1 page. A new grade structure, everybody in an appropriate grade, every grade having an appropriate pay range attached to it. And lastly, phase 4, implementation. As I mentioned, developing this as a system, also giving you the cost data necessary to make decisions on what you can afford and putting this whole thing in motion. So page 4, this is something I shared, not exactly, but closely with the employees. We wanted the employees to have some participation in this study. So I'd like to take you through very quickly the various tasks that we completed in doing this study. Now, as I mentioned, you can see the phases in blue, and these tasks correspond to the particular phase. So phase 1, a lot of time was spent, task 1, during this study, just communicating with your county coordinator. And I was very thankful because what I requested I got. That was not the case last time around to the same extent. Now this time when I would request data and information, I would get it the same day. So there's very good communication lines we had throughout the study. Task 2, the kinds of things that I collected, I wanted to look at virtually everything I could related to the current system. Collective bargaining agreements, job descriptions, all of the salaries for all the employees, the current pay ranges, just anything that would make me smarter about what is currently in place. Task 3, as I mentioned, we wanted to get the employees involved in the study. They are going to be the people that are most affected by the results of the study. So we started off in task 3 having an orientation session, I should say plural, there was more than one. And the employees by Zoom had to listen to me for a half an hour talk about what we were going to be doing during the study. The worst thing you can do is keep them in the cold, and then you end up with rumors and you end up with a big mess. We wanted everyone to know particularly what we were doing during the study and how we were going to be conducting it. And secondly, I had job descriptions, but job descriptions don't tell the whole tale about a particular job. And every employee wants to tell you something, I do this and I do that, and this isn't explained properly. So we gave everybody questionnaires, gave them a couple weeks to fill them out, asked them to supplement the job description with additional duties that they have, and get those back to me. They all did come back to me. Task 4, I reviewed all of these job questionnaires, which were over 100. And in task 5, I came out to the county and in this room interviewed all of the department heads as well as the supervisors, went over the job evaluation, the job questionnaires, and made some changes based on what the directors or supervisors had to say. So at the end of task 5, as I mentioned, and really important to understand all of the jobs and how everything syncs together, I had that understanding when we completed task 5. So we went into phase 2 then to look at the market. And the market, really two main things we had to do. The first thing is decide who we were going to be comparing to. So we chose 13 counties with, on average, pretty close taxable valuation, pretty close population. All of them more outstate than metropolitan, as much similarity as we could get to Shiawassee County. Secondly, we had to develop a survey then, and all of the positions in the study were included in the survey. So this is a pretty long survey. Went out to all of the various counties and came back, was tabulated, and a lot of interaction with those counties to get additional information. As Brian mentioned, we also wanted to deal with this donut issue of you guys are in the middle of different counties, Genesee County, Hingham County, that are bigger, that aren't really comparable, but you're recruiting the same people in many instances. When we look at prosecutors or we look at chief deputies, they're looking for your people, you're looking for their people. We wanted to include that in the report just so, again, information-wise, boards work better with lots of information. So that's in the report as well. So all of this data was compiled, and at the end of this phase 2, we had everything we needed to go forward. Now phase 3, as I mentioned earlier, internal equity is important. Am I paid fairly in relation to the person that sits 2 desks down? And we go through something called point factor evaluation, and that's included in Appendix B of your report. Every job is evaluated based on really 10 factors in this case. The idea being there that A, I have a good understanding of the jobs, B, the point factors have relevancy. There are things like how much technology does a position use, how much education is required, how much supervision do they have, what kind of working conditions do they have. All of the jobs were evaluated based on all these factors, and bingo, we came up with the grade structure. 15 different grades, each grade containing some of the jobs included in the study. So at that point, we could take the market data, we had the grades made, and we could apply the market data to create a pay range for each one of the grades. So as I mentioned earlier, this is really the centerpiece of our whole study. A new pay grade structure, 15 grades, each grade with a pay range that corresponds to what's going on out there in the labor market. We then looked at costing this. I'll talk about that in a minute, but we wanted to tell you, if we were to implement this, here's what's going to cost you. And that will be your starting cost. I'll talk about that in a minute. And again, going forward, having that ability to update it each year. So at the end of phase 3, we had everything we needed to put together that big old final report that you have. And again, something that we're trying to develop here as a system so the county doesn't have to go out and do this again in 2 years. This thing should last 7 years or more. Some of my clients go 12 years. They do a really good job of updating the pay ranges each year. That information can come back to you and give you what you need to make decisions on what's affordable for the county. So page 5 then, how is your report structured? And I know some of you have read it, and based on my experience, I don't know if all of you have been through the whole report, but the report is laid out like this. Section 1 of the report is just about 6 or 7 pages long. Everybody should give that a read. It just gives you a sense of how we approach the project and how we put things together. It doesn't get into conclusions, but it just gives you an executive sense of what the report's all about. Section 2 is the heart of the study, and if you really want to know how we arrived at what we arrived at, that is laid out in section 2 of the report. The pay grade structure is presented. There's all kinds of breakouts for the various labor unions, which complicated the study a little bit. It's much easier if you just have one non-union group to work with. You guys have a lot of unions. We've replicated the pay ranges for all of those unions. A lot of information in section 2 for you to look at if you really want the gist of what this is all about and how it was developed. Section 3 is a very short section. It just talks about how the system should be updated each year, either CPI or a survey to look at what other counties are doing in terms of raises. But each year these pay ranges need to be adjusted upward so that you stay consistent with what's going on out there. And that's included in section 3. Section 4, I mentioned employee benefits. Appendix E of your report has a full accounting of comparative benefits. Section 4 of the report is just my little narrative on where I see it being high or low, and again, some suggestions on where you might improve what you have. There are appendices throughout the report, obviously in the back, and each one of those appendices presents all of the information related to a particular focus that was evaluated and included. Things like the job evaluation, point factoring, it's all in the report. So it's there for review as well as reuse in the case of administering the system going forward. There is also a section 5 that doesn't deal with the larger employee group. It deals with those employees that are either administrative elected, the county coordinator, or the public safety units that are under compulsory arbitration contracts. So those are presented separately, and I'll talk about those in a minute as well. But the idea there is that those positions aren't in your grade structure, but they are positions that you need to deal with in terms of comparable pay. So page 6, just looking at recommendations. Again, number 1, the new pay structure includes 15 grades, so all the positions, with the exception of those I just mentioned, are included in this grade structure. And all of those, and it's hard to describe without getting into the report, but all of those positions included in the grade structure are then broken out, and all of the data is presented, replicating what's in your current collective bargaining agreements so that they can be implemented consistent with what is currently in place. Number 4, non-union jobs are presented separately, and they are given a pay range and a number of steps that are consistent with most of the other unions. There were positions that did not have pay ranges in your current system. Everybody has been assigned a pay range within the current pay grade structure. So it should be a bit of an upgrade over what you currently have. Number 6, number 5, there are 3 employees that are what we call red circle. They're paid at a rate higher than the maximum of their pay grade that we are recommending. So for example, somebody could be making $25 an hour. Our maximum recommended range level is 23. They would be red circle. So we only have 3 positions that are in that situation, a lot less than last time around. So in regard to the labor market, we've got a lot more consistency than what we had back in 2017. The other end of the spectrum is employees that are paid less than what we're recommending as a range minimum. And we have 25 of those folks that are paid less than range minimums. Those 25 positions, we're recommending you bring them up to range minimum so we have some integrity with this system. If you were to do that, the cost of doing that would be right around $57,000. That would ensure that all of the employees are included within the recommended pay ranges. We also wanted to give you a sense of what it would cost to implement all of this, the whole system. Now, let me give you an example, and I'll start off just by saying we need to put everyone on a particular step in the new system. So think of it this way. Right now, I'm in grade 7 and I make $50,000. And there's a step in the current system that is $50,000. In our new system, all the numbers are different, so we don't have $50,000 anymore. Maybe there's $51,000 in the new system. That's the closest step. What we are suggesting as a first effort on getting this implemented is that in each case you move an employee up to the next highest step. So we have some correlation with the new system. So everybody is now aligned in the new system within a step. It's not a matter of giving people pay ranges on an equal basis. Someone might be $100 from the next step, somebody else might be $1,000 from the next step. The idea here is to get everybody aligned in the new system. So if you were to do this, number 7, for all of the positions, it would be about $191,000. Now that's everybody, all the unions and the health department and the non-union. In the report, you'll see there's a breakdown for each group. For example, we have union groups now that everything's going to have to be negotiated. So if you want to view the potential financial impact of implementing, potentially you could move those aside until those negotiations come about. The non-union positions you can do something with right now. So that would give you the opportunity to have this system implemented so everybody's on a step, everybody's in a position then to move through the pay range over time. Now some people won't like the inequality of, hey, I only got $200 and somebody else got $1,200. But over time, it will all equal out as people move through the pay range. So it's probably the best way to do this this implementation process. If you wanted to move other positions higher than range minimum, when we start talking about those green circles again, you could. What I'm giving you here is really the minimum of what is required in order to get this implemented. It would cost you for everybody $191,000. I'm not sure what Brian's recommending, but again, this is all of the bargaining units as well as the non-union. And there is a breakout in, let me find a page so everybody can see what we're talking about.
Looking for 2-16.
I'm sorry.
2-16.
216. Bingo. Yeah, on 216, Exhibit 16, if anybody is interested in that, you can see how that 191,000 is broken down.
I do want to talk about that just for a brief moment. So as Mr. Notley suggested, several of those, the top 4 of them are all unions. And so theirs will not be automatic. Their union contracts are coming up, they have to negotiate, those kind of things happen. It's not just something that will be given to them, because they have to come to collective bargaining to reach those. The next one, the health department, is around 50, and that's funded with Larry's money from the state. Then when we look at the next one, all the non-reps, it says 73, almost 74. However, by the time you break out and remove the ones that are funded by some other source, like the public defender's office, the veterans office, and different ones like that, that numbers, and ones that have reimbursable salaries due to some other part of a relationship with state government, that number to the general fund's more closer to $50,000. So just a little, because Mark did not have all that kind of technical detailed data, he just collapsed non-reps and reps. But you have a lot of people that are not exactly funded by the general fund that are included in that non-rep category.
But the reps will be negotiating very soon. When do they negotiate?
Yeah, so AFSCME we're meeting with right now. 35th Circuit Court we're meeting with right now. And then I'm guessing probate and 66th District will be hearing from sometime in the middle of this year or so. So they'll be coming up soon. I hope to have an AFSCME contract and a 35th Circuit Court contract for you in January or February. We've already met with AFSCME a couple of times, met with the Circuit Court a couple of times, meeting with AFSCME again next week. So it should be close. It'll really depend on their vote and ratification if it makes it on the January agenda or if it falls to the February agenda. And then they would get their adjustments.
Greg, could I ask a question?
Please.
Dr. Boggs, so when we talk about the reps and the non-reps, are we discounting the non-reps in any way?
No.
So they'll receive the same?
The non-reps, I will say this, the non-reps, historically Shiawassee County's pay scale has been a little flat. And so we have not rewarded the people that are in managerial positions as much as we have the unions. And so this will correct some of that inequity because I think they're getting larger bumps than some of the others, including the elected officials.
Thank you.
That helps, thank you. So you're looking at about 50,000 for your initial non-union
From the general
implementation. And the health department is pretty much grant funded or state funded, so.
And the other part I would add is, so most of our higher level managerial positions and people that have been here and dedicated time to the county as a career are topped out. After the 6th year, you've kind of, or 5th year with Larry's, you reach an end of the scale. And then you are dependent on the Board of Commissioners to give you a COLA adjustment to have any advancement at all in your salary, which does not happen every year. So everyone will now be on a scale where there's room for them to grow for the next 4 or 5 years towards the maximum amount of that plus the COLA. So there is a potential that, everyone that is in a non-rep category that agrees to this, if the board approves it, I should say, will receive a new salary on January 1, and then on their anniversary date, they move up to the next level. And every year they move up the this ladder on their anniversary date. And those have all been factored into the budget for this year, because people will start moving with steps again, which they have, some of the top level people that have been here 6 years or more have not had that experience since when they started. And this will incentivize them, hopefully, to stay.
So we also have in section 5, as I mentioned, cost comparisons for the elected officials. The elected officials are anywhere between 6% and 12% below market, depending on the particular elected official. So that information is presented for the board. There is no recommendation, simply that the information is presented informationally to give you a sense of where you sit relative to others.
So Mark didn't have a recommendation, but I did provide you with one for Exhibit 19.
So this is for the elected officials as
Administrative.
information. The only thing or category I see missing is the commissioners.
And that wasn't part of the study.
So every other elected position other than the commissioners was
Yeah.
evaluated?
Yeah, the administrative positions were included.
You also would not be able to give yourselves any kind of increase until the next.
I understand that, and I'm not advocating for that. I'm saying for informational purposes only, just like
Yeah.
the other
I
elected
did
officials.
the elected officials the last time I did this study, but it wasn't requested this time. I did another study recently, similar sized county, and they did the elected officials. If you would like, I will forward that information to Brian, and it'll give you the same overview of what we would have collected, pretty much what's going on elsewhere.
Right, it's nice to have that information, not that you have to act on it, but to have it.
Understand, yeah. That was, the other things that are included on page 6, number 9, flipping over into page 7 at the top, your county coordinator is about 7% below the market average. And the comparison is the county administrators or controllers, which I think is probably representative and similar to the duties that your incumbent has.
They're the same.
And as I mentioned, there is also in section 5 cost data on public safety positions, whether it's 911 or corrections or the various police positions. Those are also unionized positions that have the option of compulsory arbitration, and we wanted to leave it as an informational piece that might be useful during negotiations, but not to make any recommendations at this point in time. So it's just presented similar to the other information in section 5 as information for the board.
I do want to point out, there's a typo in the motion. That should be Exhibit 18, not 19. I'm sorry. So when you're looking at this later, we gave the wrong one.
Okay, if you look at the scale that is following page 7, this is Appendix D in your report, and it's probably the easiest schedule to read in the report to give you the best information on what this study is all about. From the columns left to right, it shows you the far left column what the suggested grade is for each position. The second column from the left is the point parameters. When we did the point factor evaluation that determined the grades for each job, those are the ranges that the points fell within for particular positions. The actual points for every position are included in Appendix B. The third column is the job title. Some of those titles have been changed. This was an opportunity to clean some things up and to get this off on a consistent basis in all respects. So here we have job titles, and you'll see that some of them are green, some of them are red. The green are the green circles I alluded to, which are positions that are paid below our recommended range minimum. The red ones are positions, or I should say an incumbent within a position is paid higher than the recommended range maximum. So if you wanted to, you could go page by page and you get a better definition of who is paid too little and who is paid too much. Everybody else falls within the recommended range. The next column, it says current range maximum for Shiawassee. That is just what it says, the current range maximum. The second to last column is what came back from the market related to each one of those positions. There are some caveats on some of those. Those are included in the notes in Appendix C. And I'm sorry I'm referencing different parts of the report, but you could go all day long on doing that. Everything kind of fits together in its own way. And lastly, the suggested pay range maximum is the last column. That's what is being recommended as the maximum salary for each one of the particular grades. So if you read nothing else in the report, these couple of pages near the back of the study will give you a pretty good overview of what is being recommended. And this is all of the positions, and I'm going to try to say this in a non-confusing manner, but all of the positions here in Appendix D are all evaluated relative to each other to assign grades. Now what happens then in the report is that positions in particular bargaining units or non-union positions are all pulled out in different directions. So the report will show you then only those positions, say for example, that are in Ask Me. It might say position 1, grade 2, 4, 7, 9, whatever the case. All of the positions were evaluated in total. Then they were pulled out to satisfy the requirements of each of the bargaining units as well as non-union and health. So you will see in the report different pay ranges. They all tie back to this Appendix D. The range maximums are the same in all of the breakouts. That is the one constant factor. Everything else changes to accommodate the particular labor agreements. It's confusing for me to try to say that. If you read Section 2 very carefully, you can follow that logic, I think.
So one thing I will note, so the grades and the steps, people should not be caught up on what their number is or what their step is. They should look at the monetary amount. Because step 1 in our old scale was so low, there was absolutely no one on it. So there has been some shift of where people have wound up under numbers because the original step 1 is gone because it was $14 an hour. And so that doesn't exist in the new one. So there are some people that their number may have gone down, but the amount of money they're getting has gone up. That's just a classification number. And they shouldn't get caught up on that because they are getting more money. It's just the old scale was so low, there was no one at that band, and so it was removed. So they shift when you do that.
Now, lastly, I'm going to flip back to employee benefits, and I'll say this, I do a lot of the benefits comparisons, and this board and previous boards have done a really good job of administering the benefit program and making the necessary modifications to save some money. For example, going down these numbers on page 7, number 2, one of the exceptions here is that your people get more time off. If you're a 5-year employee, you get 3 days off more than the average 10-year employee, 4 days off. So pretty generous with off time. One thing that a lot of the counties are doing is shifting to PTO days. Instead of having sick vacation, personal days, they consolidated into one type of day off that, from an employee's perspective, gives them more latitude as long as they give the necessary notification. From the county's perspective, when you make that shift, it gives you the opportunity to make changes on things like how many days can be accrued, and for payouts later. Yours are pretty low actually, so that's not a consideration. But it would be an opportunity going to PTO. The trade-off of the employee is, hey, we've got a simpler system. Trade-off of the county is we reduced it a couple of days, so we don't have as much time off. Just a thought, and that's what's going on with a lot of the other counties. Your healthcare costs are high. If I looked at not net costs, but gross costs, and I compared those gross costs in the report to the gross costs of the other counties, yours are high. But at the same time, PA 152 was adopted, and you have a 20% premium copay for the employees. So if I take that 20% and consider that in a factor, your costs are fine. But at some point, some board made that decision, which proved to be a very smart decision.
So we still offer what is akin to the traditional Blue Cross Blue Shield plan offered by General Motors, which is practically unheard of, which is why it's so expensive.
You don't have a lot of the dead benefits, which is the way I kind of refer to it. Things like longevity pay for all employees. That's something that's going by the wayside. Some of the comps we looked at still provide that benefit, but I also surveyed in there how many are giving it to new employees. That's dwindling. Retiree health care is another thing that's going by the wayside. You don't have it, thank God. The unfunded liability associated with that is put more than one county under. There's only one Clinton County that still provides that benefit in the 13 that we looked at. And actually they've pre-funded. I'm shocked. They've done a really good job of maintaining the funding, but it's a bundle of cash to try to keep that benefit. What a lot of them are doing is going to a retirement health savings plan, which is the equivalent of a 401k, so it's pre-tax funded, and the money's there for eventual retirement. It grows similar to a 401k and provides the employees with something in regard to assets when you're looking at the retirement prospect. It's a good way to go, and we're seeing that more and more with counties providing that benefit. Right now, your 401's at 6% contribution. The average of the others is 8%. Going forward, again, presuming that you've got something else in negotiations that might be a negotiable point to include a 1 or 2% for that purpose, as long as you got something back, certainly. But it's something that you might be considering, again, going forward. Other than that, as I said, the benefits, they're very, very comparable with the other counties. Those are the few little areas that are different. With that, I will take any questions you have of me.
So before we start questions, I just want to go over the recommended motion so that you have something that we're focusing on. And it's to accept the wage study as proposed, and then authorize me to implement this on January 1 for elected officials as demonstrated with the market average on V2, which is Exhibit 18, not 19, and implement Appendix F respectively for the non-reps. And that includes all of the employees that are non-rep, but also mentions the unions, which is what we will be or have been using for negotiations and will continue to use when we work with them.
I've been crunching some numbers while we've been talking, and I think one of the things that's important to note is we referred to earlier about the donut effect where we are in comparison to some of these other counties, is we may be valued less than they are per person by taxable value, but we have to compete against counties that are valued way, way higher than we are.
Yeah.
And it's just as easy for someone to live here and drive to Livingston or Clinton or Genesee or any of these other surrounding counties, or even Detroit, and make much more money. So you have to try and incentivize them to stay here and maybe
Yeah.
pay a little bit more than the average.
It's an
For tax
anomaly,
value.
I know. That's why in the report, I think it's exhibit 2 or 3, section 2, if you saw it, the comparison, I mean, some of their positions are paying, comparably speaking, 50% more than what you're paying. And Oakland County isn't that far, you're right.
No,
Genesee
that's all.
County's a spit down the road, so I'd rather work here though than in Genesee County.
Yes.
It's just a nicer atmosphere here, a small town. Yeah, we run into that issue a lot in terms of with the private sector as well. Like Larry would have that issue with nurses. You've got hospital nurses, they can make a lot more in a hospital. So you've got to profile your recruitment efforts. Who are you looking for? You're looking for the person that wants to work the same stable shift, that wants to work the same stable 40 hours, that wants to be home with the kids at night or go to a baseball game on Friday, and that's your profile for recruitment. Unfortunately, the example you gave, it doesn't apply because they can get it at either place.
Is there a way to quantify this social difference, how people feel about the area
Yeah.
they're working in, and so that we can factor that in?
Yeah, you got to consider all of those factors and build your own recruitment model. As I mentioned, I'd rather work here than work in Genesee and Flint. Finding the person that wants particular attributes, and that's who you're going after. You're at a disadvantage in the public sector, just based on how much you can pay. But there's a work environment that, in my estimation anyways, is a lot more pleasant.
And that's one of the things that we have to work on selling in our recruitment, because you get more time off, you get really good health care, which is why our health care expenses are more. Now, the Board of Commissioners could change health care and then give that additional savings in salaries, but I think that you're trading something for something else that is a really good incentive that may not be a good choice. So I would recommend changing that, but I think we have to sell it in our recruiting that, you know, it's a good place to work for the reasons that everyone has said, even though you're going to lose potential revenue for yourself.
Less traffic.
Yeah, I would not want to drive it all the way down.
There's all these intangibles that you don't realize
Yeah.
until you drive to Novi every day. You get stuck on I-96 and construction for a couple hours. You're like, huh,
Yeah.
it might be easier for me to work in Shiawassee County and drive 30 minutes every day. It's 30 minutes every day, no matter what.
Yeah, well, making that drive 30 minutes, like what, 2.5 days extra you're working every month? Unless you like driving.
Right.
Not in the
Well, I've lived and worked in Detroit, and Lansing, and Shiawassee, and yeah, it's just, how can we quantify that, how can we, and I guess that, as Dr. Boggs says, that's part of the negotiating to hire somebody and emphasize, we gotta emphasize those.
That's Brian, what he's doing. It's got to be, you're building a brand and you're building a reputation and you're building just a basis for people considering you for hire.
Any other questions,
Questions?
comments?
I just, personally, I see some people there that are specialized in their tasks and stuff like that. I thought they should be raised up more, but that's, my opinion only.
Yeah, I agree.
They're really specialized, in different departments, so.
Yeah, that's a good point, Gary.
Yeah, even you work in family court or you work in a register deeds office, there's an incredible learning curve for these
Yeah,
positions.
that's why some
All
of
the
those are really
regulations.
specialized in.
Yeah.
But the data we have says that the market is saying, this is what it's worth, this is what you can get people for with those skills.
Exactly.
There's Joe.
Also realize that wherever they start on January 1, they will also, the non-reps will also get and whenever the unions agree, another step at their anniversary date.
Right.
So everyone will essentially receive 2 raises, and what's the difference between most of the grades? 4%?
8%, I believe.
Or between, no, I'm sorry,
Oh,
between each step.
between the
Yeah.
steps,
Average of 4 is.
2.5, I believe.
Yeah, so everyone will get multiple, at least 2 in this next round. So if their adjustment is small to begin with, they move to the next step at some point whenever their anniversary is. So they do get 2 bites at the apple this next year, and that's the only year that will happen.
The steps are a reward for learning those processes and the technical things and the new knowledge, presuming a person getting better as they go through the step process. You really need to have even a procedure if people aren't doing well that they're terminated. But for the most part, employees they're going to get better. And the step system is a rational way of rewarding that to a certain point. And then, well, you probably learned all you're going to learn.
I would look at this as a reset of the scale. That's what's happening for January.
Mr. Rock, this is for you. Did we plan on some raises in the new budget?
So we
That's
planned
my
on,
question.
Yeah.
we planned on implementing the study. So that cost is built in. We did not plan on a COLA adjustment. That's what we normally would do. So instead of COLA, we planned on the implementation of this based on the information that Mr. Notley has provided.
So it is budgeted.
It is budgeted.
But if COLA is not budgeted, and that is just a big factor these last couple of years.
We usually do it every year. We did not do it this year in anticipation of the wage study instead. Because everyone will get an adjustment. Everyone's going up.
2 adjustments.
Yeah, 2 adjustments. So instead of an adjustment plus COLA, they're getting these 2 adjustments throughout it. And then next year, when we do our regular budget, we'll go back to the COLA adjustments so that the scale will be up to date for at least 7 years is the goal.
Or the two adjustments, sorry. Things, do the 2 adjustments that we planned, are they going to be consistent with COLA, which is,
More or
the
less.
last couple of years, we've done pretty well.
It's not gonna be as high as inflation, but it will be comparable with what we would normally have given. It's gonna be about the same. But the difference is, they now have room to grow and a path forward where they didn't have, where large groups of our staff did not have that before. They were maxed out, and as they stayed in one place, the other employees caught up with them, and then.
Are we good?
You want a motion?
So then I will look for a motion if someone would like to give it a shot.
I'll make the motion to accept and adopt the comparative study and classification and compensation system final report from Municipal Consulting Services. Further move that the county administrator is authorized and directed to implement the final report effective January 1, 2024 with regard to non-represented employees and elected officials as outlined in Exhibit 18 and Appendix F. respectively.
Support.
I have a motion with support. Is there any further discussion?
I would note that this includes all non-reps and all electeds except me. And that is something that Greg and Cindy had suggested I get a COLA increase for this year, which is fine.
And non-electeds, including ourselves, there's nothing for us, board of commissioners and the surveyor.
Yeah, no, nothing for you.
Yes. It's important to note that we are not giving ourselves raises today.
Nothing.
I'd like a roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Holzhausen,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson,
Yes.
Commissioner Garber,
Yes.
Commissioner Howard,
Yes.
Commissioner Emery,
Yes,
Commissioner Webster,
Yes.
Chairman Broder.
Yes.
So, Mr. Chairman, If I may, so the next step is we will prepare wage adjustment sheets, which is what happens for every employee that moves up a step every year. We'll prepare all of those. We will then meet with all the elected and appointed officials, the department heads, and go over all of the non-reps and their changes, which will happen in January. Now, it does begin on January 1st, but the actual first payroll is after that, so we have a little bit of time to make those adjustments, and we'll be meeting with them in the new year to do so.
Very good. At this time, got a chance for the public to speak. Does anyone wish to speak to this board? Apparently not. In that case, we're adjourned. I believe we have food out there.